Welcome back to the People's Basics, the home of the universal basics, and our platform here, the People's Platform. Today on the program, we're going to be talking to a U.S. congressional candidate in Kentucky's 2nd District, William Compton. He is a teacher as well as a former worker for McDonald's, as we have seen on his page. And we're going to be talking to him today about his intention to run in Kentucky's 2nd District, how he can try to flip that district from red to blue, and if he is successful, what are those top priorities that he is going to be looking to accomplish if he is to be elected? Without further ado, we're going to bring him on. But before we get into that, we want to remind you all to please make sure that you're subscribed to the People's Basics and check the description section down below to join our community by clicking the Linktree link. But without further ado, let's introduce William Compton. William, welcome to the People's Basics.
Thank you for having me. I'm great to be here.
Oh, you're very welcome. So, William, before we get into all the politics and the issues that your constituents hear, I would love to just hear a little bit about why you wanted to make the pivot from teaching, as you currently do, into trying to be a public representative in the U.S. House of Representatives.
So the reason why I wanted to make the pivot was because essentially I'm not seeing anything done for the people in my district. I have lived here my entire life. I'm 27 years old, and our current representative has been in Congress since I was a freshman in high school, and I'm now in my 6th year of teaching. Everything that my parents went through, that my grandparents have went through, that I saw them struggle with, I'm seeing happening to my students' families, and even in some cases worse for them. And I'm just tired of sitting around and seeing nothing done for the working people in our district. And that's why I've moved from education. I've started to try and move into politics some more.
So when you talk about those top issues that your constituents are currently suffering through, can you be a little bit more specific? I know you come from Bowling Green, Kentucky. Can you tell us a little bit about the challenges the people in Bowling Green, Kentucky and the rest of the district are currently facing?
Yeah, one of the biggest issues that I've heard from a lot of people has been affordable health care. You know, everyone at some point does have to go to a doctor. And I've just heard story after story of how expensive it is. A little bit of a personal story. Over the summer, I had to get a shot for poison ivy because I'm really allergic to it. That cost me $1,500 for one shot.
Wow.
And it's just insane to see the prices of medicine and to see the prices of insulin for diabetics or even prices for chemotherapy for cancer patients. And I want to make that affordable. There's no reason why in the United States we should have to make the decision of having food on the table or a roof over our head or this life-saving medical procedure or drug. There's no reason for that. And honestly, that's the biggest issue that I do want to tackle at first is that affordable healthcare. We all need it. It's all a part of our lives. It's a human right that we need to make affordable.
I wholeheartedly agree that healthcare should be something that we have universally across the board. People shouldn't be struggling for their basic need of trying to have quality health. But I wanted to ask you specifically on the solutions. When I was reading through your platform, there were a lot of issues that I found are very standard for the Democratic Party, but one is a little bit more debated within the party is Medicare for all. There are certainly more progressives favoring Medicare for all, and I saw on your platform you are in favor of Medicare for all. Could you explain why you think that is the appropriate solution to this healthcare problem?
Yes. So with Medicare for all, I like doing research. So I've been doing research on other countries that have this system and financial research on how much it would cost us as a nation. And compared to our current healthcare system, this system would not only lower the deductibles that someone would have to pay for medicine or just to go see the doctor, but it as a whole saves our nation money compared to our current system. And it gives the people an option to go see doctors that they might not normally be able to see, while at the same time using their tax dollars to help pay for that. The money that we're already paying would go and help pay for that. And that's the biggest thing with Medicare for All. We're already paying for it with our tax dollars already. Let's change it and use it for us instead of something that we're not using.
I agree with you that it is a cost-saving measure. From the studies that I've seen out of, I think it was Northwestern, they estimated it's going to be roughly a $500 billion savings per year. So I certainly agree with you there. Some of the people in the party who are, maybe a little bit more hesitant towards the Medicare for All have this contention with the idea of the single payer aspect of it, the ban of duplicative coverage. Do you mind talking about why you think that is necessary?
It is necessary just for the simple fact that if we don't have that single payer healthcare, then there's a chance that the system actually just wouldn't work. Someone along the way would find a loophole that, like we've seen in the past with insurance companies, and it would just break everything apart. That single payer aspect keeps it moving and keeps it going in the right direction.
Okay. Could you be more specific with what you mean by those loopholes?
Yeah, so someone somewhere would find a way to make sure that they wouldn't have to possibly pay out as much money for a procedure, and they would start trying to hoard as much money and would try and shortchange someone along the way. We've seen it with insurance companies now as it is. They find some kind of loophole, like, for example, it's not medical related, but like act of God clauses that we see in insurance companies. So this just kind of holds people accountable. You're using that single payer aspect just to keep moving things along.
Okay. So in this case, though, wouldn't the individual still have the option potentially to go on to Medicare, essentially not having that kind of service problem? Essentially, would people have any recourse if it was a single payer system? Essentially, if something wasn't being covered and it's the only coverage being provided, does that make sense? I understand that Medicare for All obviously allows for supplemental coverage that goes above it, but I'm curious if you have any contention with providers essentially offering the same coverage as Medicare is offering.
Well, with the Medicare for All, if we don't have everyone on the same system, then it's not going to help fund itself with the tax dollars. It's kind of one of those double-edged sword type situations. Like, for example, in Kentucky with our retirement plans here, we have kind of a retirement plan system, and then we have 401ks. Well, if people aren't paying into our retirement system, that system's losing money, which is helping our teachers, versus if people start moving all of their money to these 401ks. And that was a big contention a couple years ago in the education community. So it's kind of essentially the same thing, that having everyone on this system, the coverage is still there. Everyone's getting the same coverage. But if we move to a different system and have people have in that system, then some of that tax dollars is not going to fund the Medicare for All.
I think that makes a lot of sense to me. I mean, personally, one of the reasons why I do like Medicare for All is there's essentially a simplification of the administration. A lot of the hospitals currently have to employ all sorts of administrative staff to do the processing of insurance claims. And by having one single entity that they have to negotiate with, that streamlines a lot of the processes that they have to handle currently. And so the aspect you were talking about before of the cost savings, it gets amplified by that degree. And to your other point, it becomes kind of hard to have out-of-network doctors. If it's a public option, essentially a doctor could say, okay, I'm going to take the risk to not accept Medicare patients. I only want the people who have the private providers. But if it's a single payer system, it's kind of hard for you to stay in practice when everyone is on that same plan. So that I definitely agree that Medicare for All is a good system for us to embrace. So I'd like to actually ask you, given you are a teacher, what you think we need to be doing within the education space from the federal government. Obviously, a lot of the issues when it comes to education are local issues. But what do you think that the federal government needs to be doing on the subject of education to better support teachers like yourself?
The biggest thing is just supporting the teachers. We have a national curriculum that all of our state's curriculums are pulled from, and they need to make sure that they speak to the states and let them know with high stakes testing that it doesn't need to be tied to funding. So they need to make sure that states get rid of that high stakes testing tied to funding for the schools. And then they also need to go in and they need to realize a student in Bowling Green, Kentucky, who lives in this low socioeconomic status is not going to learn in the same way that a student does in a multi-million-dollar mansion in California. And so they need to make sure that teachers can teach to those students, to the needs that that community has. And even though it's the same content, giving them that flexibility to teach in those different ways that we don't see currently in our education system. Right now, it's kind of a big, straight cookie cutter. Everyone needs to learn this, teach it the same way, feel, and it doesn't work like that with our students and even with our teachers.
So I'd love to ask you, so obviously one of the reasons we do standardized testing is so that we can kind of have some level of measurement to understand quality of performance to some degrees. We can talk about the test being flawed, but that is their intention. And so I'd love to ask you how you think we should be evaluating schools and evaluating students if we want to move away from standardized testing.
So with testing, I'm not against having testing to see where students are. With testing, I'm against having the high stakes testing that's tied to school funding.
Okay.
And that just not only causes anxiety for the teachers, but then that anxiety goes off to the students, where there are some teachers and schools who say, if you don't do good on this, we won't have a lot of funding next year. Our school's already fighting for its life as it is.
Yeah.
And so the testing is okay, and we can use that data to better inform our teaching practices, but we just need to get rid of that funding aspect that's tied with it.
I wholeheartedly agree that it doesn't put a lot of good incentives for the teacher. Honestly, it can encourage a lot of fraud in the processes too. So I'd love to ask you, kind of in holistically changing education's funding processes, you know, a lot of it currently is administered on the local and state level. Roughly 88% of total funding comes from the local and state level, and 12% comes from the federal level on average. Do you think that balance should shift at all?
I don't think it should shift, but I feel like the federal government on education should be willing to go into the states and talk with them more and figure out how best they can improve the schools with the funding. I know currently, and at least in the last administration as well, that conversation wasn't happening a lot. I feel like now it's happening a little bit more in the current one, but not as much as it's even should. And just speaking with the local and state governments, making sure they're using the funding correctly and kind of trying to advise them on the best ways to help the teachers.
Okay. And so I now wanted to ask you, one of the other things I saw on your website is that before you became a teacher, you were working at McDonald's. And I wanted to ask you, when it comes to being a laborer at a, you know, multinational large chain, like what type of assistance as a worker did you need? And can you just talk through the experience? Did you feel like you were treated well by the employers that were there? Can you just talk through the holistic experience of how labor in these types of environment are treated and what they need?
Yeah, so when I was working at McDonald's and I first started as a fry cook and ended my McDonald's career as a manager, the people that I directly worked under, so the other managers or the store manager, they were amazing. Like you could ask them for the shirt on their back and they would give it to you. They were fantastic. But above them, it wasn't so much helpful. Essentially, if you did not put your whole life into that one job, then you were nothing at that McDonald's. And it didn't feel good when they would come into the store it was always very negative comments when they would come in, and it just wasn't a good environment when they were there. But again, the ones who were in the store with us all the time, who were always there with us, working with us, it was different. They knew what was going on, they understood what was going on, and they treated us with more respect. And that's just kind of how it ended up being at my McDonald's and any of the McDonald's that I ended up working at.
Hmm. And so, in terms of that situation as a worker, do you think there was anything that you were looking for from, political representation to help you as a worker in those situations?
Yeah, the biggest thing was the amount of money we got paid.
Hmm.
Uh, I don't know if a lot of the viewers know this or not, but McDonald's workers, it looks like they don't do a lot, but there's a lot that goes into that job. A lot of cleaning. There's a lot of memorization of how to put the sandwiches together. Um, the dangers of being just around the fryers and cleaning the grills, and then in the summertime, if the air conditioning goes out, working in almost 110-degree kitchen area, and all of that goes on. uh, a lot of people don't see at McDonald's. They just see fast food, get it and go. And the pay that we were getting, even as a manager, was astonishingly low. And it seemed like I would just work 40, 45, 50 hours a week and barely make any money. And even though I was a college student, I was still struggling to make ends meet with that very small amount of money I was making.
So, are you looking for like a raise to the minimum wage, help in unionization? Is there any specific solutions you think that would help with that pay problem?
Uh, Raising the minimum wage to at minimum $15 an hour would help greatly. Um, there never was a talk at our McDonald's about unionization, but I know that that conversation has started swirling in some places across the nation, and I wholeheartedly believe that if they were to unionize, that that pay raise would go into effect, and anything that they need to make their lives better would help. So I think that would also be something that would help the workers now, that if we had back when I was working, would have been a good thing.
Okay. And so, before I talk about the actual electoral process and the person that you're running against, I would love to ask you, kind of in the hypothetical, if you are to win this race, what your kind of approach would be within Congress to try to get some of these pieces of your agenda accomplished. Do you have any particular strategies of how you would try to be a leader inside Congress?
I would just stand up for my constituents. I would present facts, present evidence. Anytime that I would present something, I would just show them the facts and educate them, kind of like I would in any situation, especially when teaching. Here's the issue. Here's how I think we should fix it. Here is the evidence that backs up XYZ of why this will work for us. And just present that evidence and do everything I can to make them see that even though you might not agree with me on this front, that I have evidence backing up that this will work, and to do everything I can to get them on that side of at least showing them evidence and just backing it up.
Okay. So now I'd love to talk about your district and the actual electoral process. So the current representative you have is Brett Guthrie in Kentucky's second district, and he's currently a Republican. And as of the last election cycle, he had won this district by 44.7 points over Hank. I think it was Hank Linderman was the person who
Yes.
ran previously.
Yes.
And so I'd love to ask you kind of what your approach is. Obviously, this is a large climb of a gap. What is your intention of trying to either close that gap and hopefully win, or try to make progress in the district to hopefully move it more to the left and to the Democrats over time? What is your approach of how you think the people need to be talked to switch these things?
The biggest thing, in which it's my lifeblood as a teacher, is just to educate the people in our district. Uh, with speaking people already, everyone knows about Brett Guthrie. They know that outside of politics, he's what they call a good guy, the good old boy that we have here in Kentucky. But when you ask them about his voting record, a lot of people don't know that. And so my strategy has been researching his voting record and coming in contact with anybody and everybody in our district and letting them know he voted against the American Rescue Plan. He voted against the child tax credits that would have allowed parents to send students to daycares and they could work during the pandemic. He voted against LGBTQ rights when he first got into office. And he voted against the clean energy and renewable energy sources, and just let people know this is what he's voting against. It's voting against everything that's helping you as a working citizen in our district. You can like him on a personal level, but on a political level, he's not doing his job. We need to get rid of him. And that's been the approach that I have been taking with a lot of people. And I have had quite a few people say that they didn't realize that his voting record was that bad. And it's kind of opened their eyes already. So that's the approach I'm hoping. And as we continue to do it, we're hoping to move everything more to our campaign side or to the Democrats in general with this election.
Okay. And so my final question is, obviously, to run a campaign, you're hopefully looking to have some people contribute money to the campaign. I'd like to ask you, how are you trying to most effectively use people's donations that you get? How do you think that could be best utilized to organize this campaign?
Right now, the donations we're receiving is used to help get out literature to the people in our district, to get the name out to the people in our district. And we're working on trying to build up some money to get something called Vote Builder, to where we can start phone banking for the people in our district. And that's currently what our donation amounts are going to. When we start getting more donations, the goal will be to start hiring full-time staff that will work on it, the campaign, all the time, and to start talking with people, to making those conversations happen, to let everyone know that we have someone running in this race that is wanting to listen to everybody. And that's where we're moving to with the donations.
Okay, thank you very much. So, William, do you have any final comments you want to share with the universal people listening in as we close today's episode?
Yes, so Kentucky is considered a very red state, but if you come into our state and you talk to the people, we just want to be heard. We just want someone that will fight for us, whether it's red, blue, or purple, yellow, whatever color. We just want someone to fight for us, something that we've lacked for so long. And that's what my whole campaign is about, a voice for the working people, the people who have been neglected for so long, and work to make things better. And that's what I'm trying to do with this campaign.
Well, I wish you the best of luck, William, in that effort. We definitely need people who are still taking the time in these very red districts to help get the message out to people that we are here to help. And so that's one of the big reasons I wanted to talk to you today, is that we can't just look at all the swing districts. We have to start investing the time into the areas all across the nation to get this message out. So I wish you well in getting that message out.
Thank you.
Okay, everyone. So that was William Compton. Again, he is in Kentucky's 2nd District, and we'll be including in the description section down below a link to his website if you want to learn more information about his campaign or to be able to contribute. With that being said, we also want to remind you again to join us here at The People's Basics. Make sure you are subscribed to our channel. As well, click the description section to find our Linktree link to join our community, follow us across social media, or come onto the platform and talk about your top issues yourself. So that being said, everyone, we hope you'll have a great day out there, a great week ahead. And as always, we hope you all stay classy out there.